I pitched a canvas tent 15 feet from my own ranch lake, made a fire pit, and lit it just before sunset. The breeze off the water was calm. My truck was backed into the brush, no one in sight for miles, just the way I liked it. 2 hours later, headlights beamed straight into my tent. Red and blue strobes spun through the canvas. I stepped out barefoot, holding a mug of coffee, only to find 2 sheriff deputies and a fuming HOA officer. "You can't camp here, sir. This is HOA property," the deputy told me. I laughed once, short and bitter. "You sure about that?" See, what they didn't know was they had been trespassing on my land for years, and they were about to find out just how badly they'd screwed up. Have you ever been told you couldn't use something that actually belonged to you? Drop your story in the comments. I'm reading everyone. And don't forget it. I'm a 37-year-old mechanic turned rancher. Spent my 20s under engines, and my 30s saving every dime to buy something that gave me peace. 2 years ago, I closed on 28 acres of mixed forest and pasture land. At the back of it, a natural spring-fed lake. Crystal clear, maybe 2.5 acres wide. That lake sold me the land. There was no HOA. At least, that's what I believed. After months of fencing, planting native trees, building trails, and a dock, I finally took a weekend off to enjoy it all. I parked my truck under the pines, set up a tent near the lake's edge, and started a fire in a ring of field stones. It was the most peaceful evening I'd had in years. Deer walked the edge of the brush. I watched the stars come up. I cooked. A small skillet of beans and sausage, cracked open a cold beer, and fell asleep with my boots tucked inside the tent flap. By morning, I was hooked. I'd found my version of heaven. And then someone left a note on my windshield. The paper looked like a parking ticket. Yellow copy paper, pre-printed fine notice, logo at the top. "You are in violation of Article 7, Section 3B, unapproved. Camping, open flame, and unauthorized presence in Common Lake area." I blinked. Common Lake area? I looked around. I was literally in the middle of my own land. I walked 50 yards in all directions. Yep, still my property. I thought it was a prank. Tossed it. Big mistake. Turns out, one of the neighboring subdivisions, about a half-mile away, had a small homeowners association. That neighborhood had a trail system, and one of their trails curved dangerously close to my lake, but never on it. Or so I thought. What I didn't know was that their old HOA map hadn't been updated in 15 years. They had been assuming part of my lake was theirs, because an old trail map mislabeled the boundary, and since no one had ever camped there before, they had no reason to care. Until now. The second time I camped, I brought a small portable grill, a cooler, and a fishing pole. I set up a few tiki torches at the edge of the rocks for light. At around 8:00 p.m., a white SUV rolls down my gravel road, a locked road with a private gate, mind you, and stops near the tree line. Out steps a woman in yoga pants and a polo shirt, clutching a walkie-talkie and a clipboard. She doesn't introduce herself. She just starts shouting, "You cannot be here! This is shared HOA recreational space, and it's after quiet hours." I calmly told her this was my private property. She demanded proof. I said, "No problem. Get off my land and I'll go get the deed." She called the cops. Police show up. But don't back Met. You sheriff deputies showed up within 20 minutes. They were polite but confused. One of them said, "We've gotten several complaints about unauthorized campfires and disturbances in this lake area. Apparently this belongs to Lakeside Meadow HOA. I shook my head. "This whole shoreline? It's mine. I have the deed." But since I didn't have it in hand, they issued me a verbal warning and told me to vacate the campsite until ownership could be clarified. Karen watched from the SUV with her arms crossed and a satisfied smirk. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed up in silence and went home. What I did next, pulling the deed next morning, I went straight to the county clerk's office. pulled up all the land plats, survey records, and deed boundaries. My suspicion was, right, the HOA's old trail map was off by more than 200 feet. The lake, the trail curve, and even the spot they called Dock Lookout were all on my land. But here's the kicker. They'd built 2 benches, a signpost, and even ran a gravel trail through my trees. On my private property. I wasn't trespassing. They were. For years. The first spark of revenge, I didn't call them. I didn't write a letter. I didn't even notify the police. I just stood on that lake bank the next evening, sipped my coffee, and thought, how poetic would it be if they kept pushing, and I flipped the law right back on them. They thought they could weaponize HOA, power. But I had land rights, I had proof, I had time, and more importantly, I had a plan. It started with 1 letter. Then they flooded my mailbox. 3 days after the sheriff visit, I pulled into my driveway and found a bright orange envelope pinned to my front gate. Inside it, a formal notice of non-compliance from the lakeside. Meadow HOA. As per community standards and environmental safety protocols, the unauthorized development of lakefront areas within association borders is prohibited. Repeated violations may result in fines up to $500 per instance and legal action. They had printed and mailed this to me, even though I'd never signed anything with them, even though I didn't live in their neighborhood, even though I had 0 legal connection to their HOA. I laughed out loud in my truck. But under that laugh, I was fuming. I called their office. It got weirder. That night, I called the number listed on the letter. A woman named Susan picked up. I calmly explained the error, told her I wasn't part of their HOA and their documents were invalid. She paused for a second and said, "Sir, all lake access falls under the shared recreational authority of the association. We've had jurisdiction there for over a decade." I asked if she had a map. She did. She offered to email it. When I opened that attachment, I realized something horrifying. They'd been working off an outdated satellite image from 2008. Their trail boundaries sliced through my land like it was theirs. They'd even drawn in picnic areas, benches, and trail routes, all on my property. They hadn't just made a mistake. They had built an entire narrative on top of it. And they were trying to enforce it. HOA members started showing up. Unannounced next weekend, I returned to the lake to fish. No camping, no fire. Just a quiet afternoon alone. But within the hour, I spotted 2 men walking down the slope toward the water, both carrying clipboards and wearing neon safety vests. One of them took a photo of my truck. I walked over and calmly said, "Can I help you?" "We're performing a perimeter inspection for HOA boundary compliance," one of them replied. I told them clearly and directly, "You're standing on private land. You're trespassing." They ignored me and started taking notes. When I tried to block their path, one of them smirked and said, "You know you can't stop a compliance check, right? We have the right to be here." That was the moment something in me clicked. They weren't just confused anymore. They were escalating. Then came the fines. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 more violation notices, 2 certified letters with fine documentation, 1 final warning about legal action if I refused to remove camping infrastructure from the shared waterfront. One letter even included a photograph of my fire ring, the one I built using natural stones. They circled it in red marker like it was some kind of crime evidence. But here's the wildest part. None of these notices came from the county. All of them were from the HOA's private legal firm. That's when I realized they had lawyered up. They were trying to scare me into submission using official language and technical terms. Karen caught trespassing. Again, one evening around sunset, I spotted movement through the trees. I grabbed my binoculars and stepped out quietly. There she was. Same woman as before, clipboard Karen, crouching near the edge of the brush, trying to snap pictures of my tent from behind a tree. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her, I just walked down, camera rolling on my phone, and approached from the side. She didn't notice me until I was 10 feet away. "Private land, ma'am. That camera of yours just earned you a trespass report," she stammered. Said she was documenting public misuse of community space. I asked her if she'd like to explain that to a deputy. She turned, red-faced, and walked back up the slope. Fast. I didn't file the report. But I saved the footage, because I knew she'd be back. They mailed a letter to my tenant, the final straw. They mailed a violation notice to my ranch house tenant, accusing him of knowingly participating in unauthorized occupation of HOA Greenbelt. He texted me a picture of it. The man had nothing to do with my lake outings. He just rented the front portion of the property for his small welding business. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake anymore. They were harassing anyone. Near my land, they wanted control. Not peace, not negotiation. Control. I had enough, and they didn't know what was coming. So I went silent. No responses, no emails, no calls to the county or legal rebuttals. Instead, I started digging. Pulled every plat map from the county, verified every inch of my survey markings, called in a registered boundary specialist, took time-stamped drone footage of every trespass marker they'd installed, and then I discovered something bigger. They had applied for a community trail expansion permit, using my land as a proposed easement, without asking, without notifying. They were building a public trail over private land they didn't own. I didn't need revenge. I needed a paper trail. One they couldn't wriggle out of, one that would bury them in their own arrogance. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to outlawyer them. They wanted a fight, but I wasn't about to give them the kind they expected. I didn't rage post online, didn't storm their office, didn't threaten lawsuits. Instead, I took the route they'd never anticipate: precision, paperwork, and patience. I'd already pulled the plat maps and documented the trespasses, but now I needed to turn every inch of this mess into legal ammo, the kind even the county couldn't ignore. So, while they kept sending warnings, I kept building a case. First, I filed a quiet title. Claim quiet title actions are rarely used, but they're powerful. Basically, it's a legal way to say, there's confusion over who owns this land. Let's clear that up once and for all. The trick? You need documented history, surveys, and proof of encroachment, which I had. I paid a boundary specialist $1,400 for a full GPS-verified survey report, one that confirmed the HOA's benches, trail, and signposts were deep inside my property. Then I filed with the county land court. No announcement, no email to the HOA, just a silent opening move. Then, I used their own imagery against them. You remember that outdated 2008 satellite map they were using? The one they emailed me to prove their boundary? Well, turns out, Google Earth Pro has a timeline slider. I downloaded every single satellite image of my area from 2005 to present, and in those images, over time, you could see when their trail first crossed into my tree line, when they built the benches, when the gravel path was laid, when the HOA installed signage on my land. Each timestamp was crystal clear. Each image legally admissible. It was like they documented their own trespassing from the sky. I also logged every trespass, visit time and photo for weeks. I started a routine. Parked near the lake with my truck angled toward the access trail, mounted a motion-activated trail cam near the dock. Logged every instance someone walked past my private property sign, stored every file in a folder by date. With matching GPS tags, I wasn't just collecting content. I was building a timeline of continued, knowing trespass, the exact pattern that turns an honest mistake into actionable nuisance behavior under state law. Meanwhile, they thought I'd backed down. The notices slowed down. They thought I'd finally given in. Karen didn't come back. The patrols stopped. No more clipboards. No more shouting from SUVs. But I knew what that silence meant. They were either regrouping or they thought they'd won. That's exactly what I wanted them to believe. Because behind the scenes, I was preparing 3 legal grenades, and once they went off, there'd be no walking it back. The loophole that changed everything. Late one night, reading through county zoning policies, I noticed something strange. Any HOA that proposes a shared-use trail or park area must provide evidence of land ownership or long-term easement agreements for all sections of public-facing space. It hit me like a truck. That trail expansion permit they filed, they didn't just wrongly use my land, they claimed ownership in official planning documents. That crossed a new legal line, fraudulent misrepresentation in land use filing. If I could get that permit file and compare it to my deed, I could prove that the HOA submitted a false application to the county. I made one visit to the county clerk and hit gold. Next morning, I drove to the county land office and requested the HOA's submitted trail plan application. It was public record. Within 15 minutes, I had a printed copy in my hand, and right there, in bold text, all sections of the proposed trail route fall within HOA-maintained common area or approved easement parcels. That was a lie, a documented, provable lie, and now I had everything I needed. Emotionally, I was calm, but locked in. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure, truth, justice, boundaries, literally and legally. I had spent months building my dream ranch. I cleared brush, dug ditches, planted trees by hand. And these people, strangers who lived half a mile away, who had never paid a dime toward this land, thought they could bully me with mailers and maps? They messed with the wrong person. I didn't yell, didn't post it online. I just smiled as I sealed the envelope, one copy of my official complaint to the county zoning board and another to the state real estate licensing bureau, because once you falsely claim land to push a development plan, that's not just an HOA issue anymore. That's fraud. I was almost ready to strike, but I held back. There was one last thing I needed, a final walk along the shoreline under the trees they had mistaken for community green space. I walked past the trail sign they posted, on my land, past the bench they installed, and I reached down and placed a small wooden stake in the soil. On it, I tied a little red ribbon. It wasn't to mark the boundary. It was to remind me. This is where they crossed the line, and where I'll draw it back. The legal gears were now turning. They had no idea what was coming. But they were about to find out. The day it all hit, county zoning. Sent the letter, it started with a letter. A plain envelope marked Planning and Zoning Division, stamped and sealed, delivered directly to the HOA board's listed address. Inside, a notice of zoning violation and potential permit fraud. The very document I had triggered weeks earlier. The board president, the same one who never returned my calls, the one who stood beside the officers when they came to remove me from my own land, was now in a panic. Why? Because, in the eyes of the county, this wasn't a neighborly dispute anymore. This was now an investigation into fraudulent development plans, potential misuse of private land, and years of unpermitted recreational infrastructure. And every complaint, backed by timestamps, satellite evidence, land records, filed by me, HOA, was ordered to cease use of trail. Immediately, just 7 days later, the second letter came down, this time taped to the actual trailhead sign inside the HOA subdivision. Notice, all trail access suspended pending property dispute resolution, trespassers subject to penalty. That sign was placed by the county itself, not me, not some private lawyer. The county had effectively shut down the entire trail system because they couldn't legally verify that any of it belonged to the HOA. Residents were confused, some angry, others embarrassed. I stayed quiet. Bored panic starts spreading. And then the fines begin. I got the next update from a neighbor, someone I'd met through the zoning office who lived inside the HOA but had no love for it. She told me the board held an emergency meeting. And during it, the treasurer announced something shocking. The HOA had received a $9,000 fine from the county for operating public use infrastructure on private land without recorded easement, and more fines were incoming. They'd also been warned that if they didn't remove the signage, benches, and gravel from my land, the fine would double. The HOA president tried to spin it like a county overreach, but word was spreading. They were losing trust, not just with the county, but their own members. I served one final blow, a certified letter once. I confirmed the zoning freeze. I mailed one last envelope. This one was from me, certified, tracked, signed for. Inside, a formal notice of trespass and demand for removal, giving the HOA 10 business days to take down every structure on my land or face civil litigation. The benches, the signs, the gravel trail. Even the camera pole they snuck in without asking. I didn't threaten them with words. I backed every sentence with platted maps, timestamps, and state law. No bluff, no insult, just pressure, the kind only truth can apply. The day they finally showed up on the 9th business day, just before noon, 2 trucks rolled down the HOA access trail with a work crew and a flatbed trailer. I watched from my dock as they pulled up the benches, unscrewed the signpost, shoveled up the gravel trail section by section. No apology, no knock on my door, not even eye contact, just quiet removal, piece by piece, like cleaning up a crime scene. And when they were done, they left behind one thing, a printed apology letter inside a plastic sleeve, zip-tied to a stake. It read, "To the landowner. We acknowledge the boundary issue and regret the prior use of your property. We will cease all further access moving forward. Sincerely, LMHOA Board." I kept that letter, framed it, hung it inside my shed right beside the fishing rods. What I did after. Just for me, I took that same stretch of trail, the one they used without asking, and planted 2 rows of native trees across it. Not fences, not barriers, trees. Let them grow tall, let them erase the footprints. Then I built a new fire pit, surrounded by stones I engraved myself. On one of them, I carved a simple phrase, "Not yours." And just beside it, I set a plaque, small, subtle, almost hidden at first glance, with a single phrase, because while they tried to control the land with rules, I reclaimed it with truth. And now, things are quiet. They don't bother me anymore. There's no more mail, no more clipboards, no more flashlight patrols through my woods. Their trail is gone. Their common lake fantasy, buried. And every weekend, I still camp by the lake, the same lake they once tried to call theirs. But now, I do it with a chair, a cooler, and a smirk, because I didn't need to raise my voice. Didn't need to yell or fight. I just proved what was mine, and let the law speak louder than they ever could. This wasn't just about a campsite. It was about people thinking they can control what isn't theirs, using titles, threats, and fake authority. But here's the truth. You can print rules, you can call cops, you can even mail fines. But if you don't own the land, you don't get to write its story. I do. Would you have let them keep using your land, or done exactly what I did? Comment below and tell me what your line in the sand would be. And if you enjoyed watching this play out, hit subscribe. I've got more real HOA chaos coming soon.